There are over 100 different series of manga that you can read right now, and for most people, and due to certain apps, anywhere as well. Personally, for about a year now, I have been collecting and physically reading more manga, comics, and graphic novels, and when looking for something new to read, and at the same time not straying too far from my liking and individual taste, it becomes a bit of a hunt. As I'm searching for new material, manga in this case, one series that always caught my eye was Radiant. Some of you may have heard or seen this series around town a few years ago. The volumes of each cover constantly had my attention, like who's ever on this cover right here looks sick as hell, dude. I wanted to know more, of course. I asked a few people and they said that you will enjoy it if you're a fan of shonen in general. I do like shonen. Okay then, so I bought the first few volumes, read the first one, and thought, it's okay. Yeah, kinda anticlimactic, don't you think? But fear not, I will go into as much depth as I can to explain how this series went from something very generic feeling to one of my favorites of all time. This will probably be one of my most comprehensive reviews of a series thus far, so I hope you stick with me on this journey. Allow me to tell you about the vivid and magical mantra, Radiant. Now that last thing I just said wasn't a slip of the tongue. Yes, manhwa. Simply put, it means French manga. Similar to manhwa being Korean, I'm pretty sure. You see this name right here? That's not a Japanese name. The creator of this series is Tony Valente, a man born and raised in the French projects of France, so he knows a thing or two about life, as well as a thing or two about drawing in general. Similar to most creators, they don't immediately start making their own big thing, at least in a professional and official sense, of course. Mr. Valente has helped others with their works and has made his own small comic series beforehand, something about a ninja girl. Not too long after that, he went on to start creating his own manhwa. On July 4th, 2014, Radiant would be known. Just in France, though. But it was so good that a year later, Japanese publication picked it up as well and started selling it there too. And eventually Viz Media would also jump on board and spread the good French word of Radiant, which would also lead to the anime. I'll get to that later. So hearing that this was a French manga had my focus for sure when deciding to check this out. Especially seeing from the fact that when you go to its very small Wikipedia page, it'll give you the option to translate the French chapter titles. I had volumes 1 through 4, opened the first few pages of each one, and was taken back by a bit. That's the first real aspect that I completely love about the chapters and physical volumes. The colored pages are magnificent. Are you seeing this? It's honestly beautiful. It's so vibrant and really pops. A lot of the color gives the world and what you're reading a lot of life and care put into it. I'm already a sucker for color pages in general, from normally reading stuff in black and white 92% of the time, so seeing this for the first couple of pages for each volume was cool to me. Now, I know having color in manhwa or manga is nothing that special, but that only happens for certain series and for certain books, and if you're in certain countries. Take these two manga for example, Beastars and Kakegurui. For a good number of people, you would know that both of these series have some really good colored pages, when you're reading online most likely. But I don't. So when it comes in physical form, I don't get those in the books. I don't know why, and this even happens for some of the most popular manga there could be. Usually when they reprint it in a bigger and better format, they'll finally include them, I guess as a bonus for the extra bucks, but the thing is, this apparently only happens in the US. Yeah, seriously, again, I don't know why, I'm guessing because of time constraints or something, or ink, coloring, who knows. Anyways, tangent aside, yes, I really like the art of Radiant, like, a lot. Even when it's in the standard black and white format, it still looks very lively. When you see the structures of towns, castles, small and cramped interiors, there's so much consideration put into it. The character designs are superb, the amount of detail and thought put into their outfit is something I like as well. This character here, Okaho, is a prime example. Pretty much everything in her attire has a purpose and reason. It's not just throwing clothes on someone or just giving everyone the same outfit more or less. And for my particular taste, I'd say the best thing that Radiant's art does flawlessly is the idea of scale. And what I mean is using size as a great comparison to show the importance and power of something or someone. Let me elaborate. Seth, the main character, and friends go to Rumbletown early on in the series. It's a simple town with a massive ass clock tower and bell that can be seen from anywhere. It's huge. By the climax of the arc, Seth has about 3 encounters with enemies. The first one is 2-3 times bigger than him. Granted, this guy is older than him, yes, but for most of the fight, Seth has to literally jump up or find high places to jump off of to hit him in the first place. With giving everything that he has, he barely won. Later, he fights someone who can command these very powerful tornado-like abilities, and they can scale up to this. You see that? That's Seth in comparison to the attack. Clearly he's struggling, and then after all of that, a new challenger approaches, and the amount of power that's displayed here with just one picture is incredible. It's probably my favorite panel in the entire series. It's this page right here.
Holy shit.
Yeah. Remember that clock tower? He towers above that. It's insane. And shit was only getting started from that point. It's like One Piece in that regard of using scale to really tell the reader this is literally a big fucking deal. Radiant's art is phenomenal. That's all you need to know. But enough geeking out about the art. This series does have a story, so what is it? The main character, Seth, basically lives out in bumfuck nowhere and almost on a weekly basis deals with these monsters called nemesis. They fall from the sky and are basically giant wild animals that can do more, and they wreck a lot of shit. If only there was some kind of way to deal with this problem. That's where the wizards come in. People who are outcasts of society who have the ability to deal with these creatures. How is that possible? Through the magical art of Fantasia, the power system of this series. Contact with the nemesis basically shocks your body like lightning, and as such, not many people actually survive. But those who do are now granted the ability to manipulate magic. Not just conjure it up from thin air, they have to use special tools to do so. Best way I can describe it is like Jujutsu Kaisen, but reversed. Pretty much everyone in that series has the ability to use cursed energy and their own style. But for some characters like Maki, she really can't. So she uses tools and weapons that are imbued with cursed energy. Nearly everyone in Radiant has to use a tool of some sort to help them. Not for Seth though. He's that special kind that can wield Fantasia with his bare hands, and it's easier for him if anything. And after enough destruction from these monsters, Seth has made it his mission to find the nest that homes these beasts. That place is said to be a mythical area called Radiant. That's pretty much the plot in the most basic way without going into real spoiler territory. Of course, on his adventure, he meets a few people who help him along the way. There's Doc, who's basically just Usopp. Grim, a mysterious man, I guess I can call him that, who sometimes helps Seth and friends from time to time. Best girl Okaho, who can take charge and fight like no tomorrow, and Melee, another girl who just wants to help and make friends along the way. Though it's a little rough for her, given the other side effects when touching Nemesis. Yes, even though you get the power to trap and hunt monsters like Melee, or have a plethora of tricks like Grim from wielding Fantasia, downside to being a wizard are the infections, which varies from person to person. Why it's hard for Melee specifically is because her infection is basically bipolar, or Launch from Dragon Ball. Yeah, that's a better way of putting it. But unlike Launch, it just happens randomly, as opposed to there being a trigger of some sort. So that can either be helpful or more trouble. Again, it varies. Being a giant is this woman's infection, and that gives me an erection. Doesn't sound too bad, but there are more problems. Biggest one is that even though wizards can now hunt Nemesis, they themselves are also being hunted by the Inquisition. The military, pretty much. More specifically, a group of people who deal with potent wizards and the infected who may cause trouble. They essentially treat them like the monsters that fall out of the sky and criminals. That's why the wizards and the infected are treated like pariahs. If the people with the power and in charge say that they're bad, then it must be true. In other words, racism. Awesome, right? And the wizards can't just fight back that easily, because the Inquisition have the thaumaturges, those who specialize in fighting other wizards with some broken-ass powers compared to everyone else. So yeah, Radiant went from a story of a boy going on an adventure of wild creatures to trying to fight against racism and wonder why the world is kind of fucked up. That is pretty much the basis of the Rumbletown arc. Seth comes to terms that the world is not just about this place that may or may not exist, but something a lot more complex and needs to take an understanding of the world to have a grasp of what's really going on. And as a main character, Seth is pretty good, probably my favorite in the story. At first, he felt like the typical main character shonen trope of dumb boy punch first, no questions ever, but during the events of Rumbletown, from seeing a city go up in flames and more, that did mature him quite a bit. After that, the only time he's quote-unquote dumb is because he just straight up does not know how something works. Kid grew up in the country with a single mother figure, so I can't really blame him. Afterwards, though, he becomes a pretty kick-ass character in my book, especially seeing how he grows not just as a character, but as a wizard and fighter. The abilities and skills he uses throughout the series are cool to look at. Sure, they're just the simple punches and few projectile attacks, but later he learns powers and techniques that you wouldn't really think that he would get. But when he does get them, he uses them to the fullest. For example, he gets this form, I don't know, it doesn't have an official name, I just call it his feral form. He gets it, can't control it, but learns how to, and even though it sounds simple on paper, just seeing him use it is visually pleasing. Not just from looking cool, but how he obtained it, which is something else that puts this series' world building to peak condition, as well as learning using Fantasia in a different way, and the same applies for all of the main characters. Okaho gets better with her abilities, Grim is a man who can summon shadows, ghosts, and giant blades, Melee gets better with her trapping spells and infection, and Doc, he may honestly suck from time to time, but he ends up getting the coolest power-up. And the same goes for the opposing side of the Inquisition. They legit have some busted powers. Like, this kid here, he scares me. Fear aside, my favorite of them would be that of Santori, a high-ranking member of the Order. This man is so cool. The more I thought about it, the more I realized this is brilliant character design. Santori is an old man who loves to fight and loves bragging that he's done all these things before in his life. So clearly, he has a big ego. And what better power to give him than have him have a literal astral projection of himself? That's fucking awesome! How he uses it is so cool and indicative of the character, and it really seals the deal. Everything that I've been talking about reaches its climax and greatness with the Sanfandir arc, or better known as the Wizard Knights arc, where it takes all the stellar world building and makes you to want to learn more about Theranos, the world that they live in. Characters getting better and stronger through different means of physically or emotionally, and meeting others who pull their own weight and have kick-ass moments themselves. It finally clashes with one special fight of Seth versus Santori. This became one of the best fights I have read in some time. There's honestly not that many fights within Radiant, and I mean real battles where characters drop everything, absolutely go balls to the walls, all or nothing showdown, no interruptions, and there's a clear winner. Both fighters use everything that they've learned up to this point and hold nothing back. And with me describing the powers that these two possess, it's incredible. It was so good, I read it twice the same night. I rarely do that. That's when this series became one of my favorites. Okay, but let me take a step back and stop geeking out. So, with all that I've just gone through, you might be thinking, damn, this series sounds pretty good, but if it's this cool, how come I've never really heard of it or seen anyone else say anything about it? Well, there's a few reasons from that I can kind of theorize, as well as go over the cons of the series. Where I just spent about 5 pages worth of a script fanboying, there are a few issues I do have. The first thing on why this series isn't really talked about is from the fact that it's a French manga. It might sound obvious, but bear with me. This even took me a minute to realize Radiant isn't published in Shonen Jump or anything similar. It doesn't go off of chapter by chapter agenda, it's volume by volume. That's why you will never hear anyone say something along the lines of, bro, Radiant this week was fucking Radiant. None of that mid shit, you know what I mean, bro? That's what some of you sound like online unironically, so stop it. It's more like, Radiant with its newest volume in the past months was pretty cool. So with it having that schedule, not many people keep up with it, which leads into the other point on why it's like that. Look, I tried finding any clues or hints to the sort, but from what I can understand and tell, Mr. Valente pretty much works alone on this entire project. Yeah, you can see only his name on the covers, it's nothing unusual for this type of stuff. I mean, he really does work alone. Other mangaka you can think of have full staff helping them, like Oda from One Piece. Dude has an entire floor, if not a building's worth of people that help with everything One Piece related. Even for smaller series, there's probably at least one other person. Not for this though. He's expressed that he does sometimes get helps, but they're not permanent jobs. So Tony does all the art, all the story, all the coloring, all the dialogue, everything. He has an editor, but I mean everyone has that at least, but not anyone else really helping him. And the thing is, the volumes aren't always on a schedule. They may come out every other month, but the latest one came out just last month, and the one before that was last year because of COVID, and it got delayed 3-4 times. And then volume 15 is hopefully set for October in France first. The next big one is the anime. I'm gonna be completely blunt. The anime kind of sucks in comparison to the manga. I'm honestly not that anal when it comes to trying and enjoying any series by different mediums. If a series has an anime and manga, it's up to you on which one you want to consume. But again, it's not that great for what they have to work off of. The best and most concise way to describe Radiant's anime is that it feels like another anime with fantasy and magical elements instead of a shonen that has magic as its power system. And the biggest thing that I can point out is when it comes to the big moments in battles. In manga form, Radiant's fights, you see them step by step, and it's pretty awesome to see, and this applies to pretty much any other show. So, how do you take the very detailed moments in fights and translate them in an animated form? You, of course, give it good animation, and shonen anime take quite a bit of pride in their fights. I know I said Radiant doesn't have that many fights, but when they happen, it's pretty much a death match. And so Radiant gears more towards being a battle shonen, but for the few fights, the anime does not put in the effort to really give it the same weight and feeling of what was happening on page. This moment isn't even really a fight, but a dope event. These guys stroll up to the queen and basically say, "Surrender or we're going to take over your land," and she says, "Fuck you," in the most queen attitude there could be. The panel shows off her size, dominance, and authority, and how does the anime do it?
そなたらの屍が渦高い山をなすであろうとな女王のミッション確かに受け取った
I'm not even saying that the anime would have blown up tremendously indefinitely, but it would have helped Radiant have a better reputation for sure, because I've seen the past 2 years now that if an anime does stupidly well, the whole series explodes. Like Tokyo Revengers. Nobody honestly knew that this series even existed. The second episode 1 drop, everyone is suddenly an expert on everything about it. But yeah, Radiant's anime, you know, the version that most know it by, especially seeing those handful of videos of people talking about that and not really the manga, it's not really all that good. But hey, what the hell do I know, right? I asked my friend on 2 separate occasions about the Radiant anime, and he said, with no hesitation, that he loved it. Different folks, different strokes. So, the anime, with not being the best, is the manga flawless then? No. There's honestly only really one issue that I have with it, and it's pretty early on and possibly another reason why there's not that many avid fans for people who dropped it. That's the pacing. Remember how I said that the first volume was okay at best? And if I'm being truthful, I still kind of think that. I knew something was off when the first chapter alone was over 100 pages. That's fucking ridiculous. It's whatever though. I mean, it does a fine enough job of explaining of how the world is, with nemesis, wizards, fantasia, characters, the works. Though it's still a little slow for the few chapters after that. The main team go places, they do things, but it doesn't really feel like anything's happening. They're just meeting one freak show after another. But my absolute main thing that I can't get over, which kind of plagues all over the first arc for the first half, is the dialogue. It's so cluttered and cramped, and it just takes up so much. I don't mind or hate the story that's being told, it's just that you're presented so much of it at once. When you're learning about something new, it just becomes overwhelming. There's moments where it's just nothing but narrative and exposition dumps all at once. When you're learning about a character's past, oh, you better fucking believe that you're learning everything about it right then and there. Fuck what's happening now. Like, within chapter 16, look at this. It's kind of ridiculous. And the anime does not fix this because in the beginning of the adaptation, there's an egregious amount of pure, pointless filler. It got to the point when and where I wasn't fully invested in the series to sometimes say, I don't want to read Radiant tonight. There's just way too much fucking talking to read about. And unfortunately, all the praise I gave the art doesn't really get used to its fullest by this point. There's only a few times where the art tells you the story as opposed to you just basically reading an entire article of what just happened. That mostly happens within volume 1 through 3. It gets better by 4 and 5, having a balance of story and art, and exponentially gets better by volume 6 and onwards. So pacing and a bit too much exposition were my main problems, but I honestly shouldn't be too harsh because of how Radiant's release schedule was in the beginning. It was only signed for 1 volume. That's it. So I get that Tony had to try to explain as much as he could without too much to really work with. Then he was signed for 2-3 more volumes. Had a little bit more to work with, but still not complete freedom. Did pretty well enough though, and by volume 5, he was free to do whatever he wanted with better pacing, timing, art, and everything. It got so much better by that point. So, this might be my longest video yet. As you can definitely tell, I like Radiant quite a bit. Even with the rather slow pace of the start of it, it really starts picking up after some time and impresses me greatly with every chapter that I read. With the amount of real work and knowledge that's put into the story, art, characters, power, and everything, I'm thoroughly entertained. Also, don't let me rip apart the anime to deter you from checking it out. If you really want to watch it, then go ahead. I'm not your parent, nor do I sign your paycheck, so if you're curious about it, let that curiosity carry you. With all that I've said, if you're still not really interested, the best way that I can describe it is that if you totally love the vast, colorful, mysterious world building of One Piece, and the pretty unique and not too complicated power system similar to Nen and adventure-like style shonen of Hunter x Hunter, fights that truly speak for themselves of fun abilities and something different from being based on European folklore and myths, then Radiant is for you. The only other person who could probably tell you about it is Mr. Valente himself.
Here's a French manga. You don't have to read it, but if you want to, maybe do so. S'il vous plaît, lisez mon livre.
And that is the review of Radiant. So far, there are about over 100 chapters, so that's really nothing to those who read everything and quickly all at once. And all I gotta tell you is that you should have known that this series was goated when the main character had horns. It's that easy. So yeah, as you can definitely tell, I fucking love Radiant, and I really do wish that there were more people who would read it, watch it, or just experience in some shape or form. And it's honestly within my top 10 favorite series of like manga or manhwa or anything within that category. So I like it. It's really, really good. So yeah, I'm done talking. I'm out of breath. I'm tired. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. You know what to do with all the links that I provide and everything sort. Thank you for watching. That's greatly appreciated, of course. Have a great day. Have a great night. And everything else, you know what to do. Bye.